9:47 a.m. The Strait of Hormuz. The sun is already brutal, hammering down on flat, glassy water, the color of hammered bronze. The air temperature on the surface is 41 degrees Celsius. There is no wind. The humidity sits at 83% and makes the air feel like wet concrete pressing against your skin. Visibility is good, 10 miles in every direction. And through that visibility, anyone watching could see the MV Olympia Star making her way northwest through the shipping lanes at 12 knots, her hull riding high and empty, returning from the Fujairah anchorage toward the loading terminal at Ras Tanura. The Olympia Star was a very large crude carrier, 330 meters from bow to stern, registered in the Marshall Islands, operated by a Houston-based shipping company under long-term charter to a consortium of American energy firms. Her crew of 22 included 12 American citizens, her captain, her chief engineer, and 10 additional officers and technicians. She was, in every meaningful legal and practical sense, an American vessel operating in international waters under American interests. She was also, at 9:47 a.m., surrounded. 4 Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps fast attack boats had appeared from the north, emerging from the shadow of the Omani coastline at high speed, their hulls barely touching the water as they closed the distance. 2 more appeared from the east. A 7th materialized from behind a large Panamanian-flagged bulk carrier that had been tracking parallel to Olympia Star for the previous 40 minutes. Not a coincidence, as would later be determined. Simultaneously, an Iranian Coast Guard cutter, a former U.S. Navy patrol vessel captured during the 1979 revolution, still flying Iran's colors, moved to cut across the tanker's bow. The IRGC boarding team was already in rigid inflatable boats before the fast attack vessels had completed their encirclement. 12 armed men in tactical gear, moving fast across the water toward Olympia Star's boarding ladder. The captain of the Olympia Star broadcast a distress call on Channel 16 and began evasive maneuvers, hard right rudder, engines to maximum ahead. But a 330-meter tanker riding in ballast does not turn quickly. The IRGC boats matched her turn without effort. The boarding team reached the ladder in 4 minutes. In Tehran, the decision to seize the Olympia Star had been made at the highest levels of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps 3 weeks earlier, in direct response to the United States Treasury Department's designation of 3 Iranian oil trading companies as sanctions violators, a designation that had frozen assets and cut off banking access that the IRGC had spent years quietly building. The seizure of an American crude vessel in the Strait of Hormuz was, in the calculations of the IRGC leadership, a proportionate and legally defensible act of reciprocity. They would hold the crew. They would demand the lifting of sanctions. They would negotiate from a position of strength with 22 hostages, 12 of them American citizens, as their leverage. They believed the Americans would negotiate. They were catastrophically wrong. Iran made 5 catastrophic mistakes from the moment their fast attack boats crossed the horizon toward the Olympia Star. First mistake, the USS Bataan Amphibious Ready Group was 38 nautical miles away. The Wasp-class amphibious assault ship USS Bataan, carrying the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, 860 Marines, a full complement of AV-8B Harriers, MV-22, Osprey tiltrotors, CH-53E Super Stallion heavy-lift helicopters, and AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters, had been transiting the Strait of Hormuz outbound when Olympia Star's distress call was received. 38 miles. At the speed of an MV-22 Osprey, that was 11 minutes of flight time. At the speed of an AH-1Z Viper at maximum cruise, it was 8 minutes. The IRGC planners had tracked USS Bataan on commercial maritime databases. They had assessed her as leaving the operational area. They had not accounted for the speed at which a fully embarked Marine Expeditionary Unit can reverse course, spin up aircraft, and be on target. Second mistake, The USS Mahan was closer than they knew. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Mahan had been operating under emissions control in the central Strait of Hormuz. Her radar and radio transmitters, silent, indistinguishable on any Iranian surveillance platform from the dozens of commercial vessels transiting the waterway at any given hour. She was 11 nautical miles from the Olympia Star when the seizure began. 11 miles at 30 knots is 22 minutes of sailing. But her helicopters, two MH-60R Seahawks, both armed, both crewed and ready, were airborne within 4 minutes of Olympia Star's distress call. They were on station over the tanker in 9 minutes. Third mistake. The IRGC communications were already compromised. U.S. Signals Intelligence had been monitoring IRGC naval communications in the Strait of Hormuz at high fidelity for 16 consecutive days following intelligence reporting that the Guard was planning a maritime interdiction operation against a commercial vessel. The exact vessel, the exact date, and the exact operational plan were not known. But the indicators had been sufficient to place Fifth Fleet on elevated alert status and to position USS Mahan in the strait specifically to respond to this contingency. When the IRGC fast attack boat commanders transmitted their final coordination messages to the cutter at 9:31 a.m., 16 minutes before the encirclement was visible to the Olympia Star's bridge. Those transmissions were received, translated, and transmitted to Fifth Fleet, USS Mahan, and USS Bataan before the Iranian boats had accelerated to attack speed. The Americans knew it was happening before it happened. Fourth mistake. The legal framework was already prepared. The United States does not improvise its use of military force. In the 72 hours following the intelligence indicators that suggested an Iranian maritime interdiction was being planned, the Judge Advocate General's office at Fifth Fleet had prepared and received approval for a complete legal framework authorizing the use of force to recover the seized American vessel and American citizens in international waters. The finding was not ambiguous. The seizure of an American-crewed commercial vessel in international waters by a state actor constituted an act of piracy under international law and an armed attack on American nationals under the laws of armed conflict. The use of force to recover the vessel and its crew was not merely authorized. It was affirmatively sanctioned under both domestic and international legal frameworks. The rules of engagement were already written and already in the hands of every commander in the theater. There was no delay waiting for lawyers. The lawyers had already finished. Fifth mistake. They brought their boats within range of the best small unit warriors on Earth. The 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit's maritime raid force, the specialized element of the MEU trained specifically for ship seizure, hostage rescue, and visit, board, search, and seizure operations, had been conducting training exercises in exactly this scenario for 6 of the preceding 8 months. They had rehearsed the seizure of a very large crude carrier 17 times in live exercises, including 4 times with actual tanker vessels in the Persian Gulf during the current deployment. They knew the layout of every major VLCC class in commercial operation. They knew the standard locations of IRGC boarding team staging areas. They knew the structural vulnerabilities of the fast attack boats that surrounded the vessel. They were ready for this specific problem in a way that the IRGC boarding team, 860 miles from its home base, standing on a rolling tanker deck in 41-degree heat, simply was not. What happened in the next 34 minutes was not a rescue operation. It was the execution of a plan that had been rehearsed until it was reflex. At 9:51 a.m., 4 minutes after the IRGC boarding team reached the Olympia Star's ladder, the 2 MH-60R Seahawks from USS Mahan arrived on station. They did not engage immediately. Their first task was to establish a complete visual and sensor picture of the vessel, the surrounding fast attack boats, and the position of the boarding team. Their FLIR sensors mapped the deck of the Olympia Star in real time identifying 12 IRGC personnel moving forward toward the bridge. 2 Iranian fast attack boats maintaining station on the port side, 3 on the starboard side, and the IRGC cutter holding position 500 meters ahead of the tanker's bow. The picture was transmitted to USS Mahan, USS Bataan, 5th Fleet, and the National Military Command Center in real time. At 9:53 a.m., the Olympia Star's captain, following emergency procedures he had practiced in company drills, activated the vessel's secure satellite distress beacon, a separate system from the standard Channel 16 radio, designed to transmit precise GPS coordinates and vessel identification data to a restricted military receiver network. The beacon's signal was received by USS Mahan within 2 seconds of activation. It confirmed the boarding team was aboard and moving toward the bridge. At 9:54 a.m., the boarding team reached the bridge. 3 IRGC personnel entered the bridge with weapons drawn and ordered the captain to stop engines and comply. He complied. The engines were stopped. The Olympia Star sat motionless in the Strait of Hormuz, her crew of 22 concentrated, as per their company emergency procedures, in the vessel's citadel, a reinforced internal compartment on the 3rd deck, below the bridge, with its own air supply, communication systems, and a watertight steel door designed to resist forcible entry for a minimum of 48 hours. The IRGC boarding team found an empty bridge and an empty ship. It took them 11 minutes to locate the citadel. When they did not have 48 hours to work on its door. They had 4 minutes. At 10:06 a.m., the first element of the maritime raid force arrived over the Olympia Star. 4 MV-22 Ospreys carrying 64 Marines approached from the south at low altitude, dropping to 50 feet above the water as they closed the final mile to the tanker. Simultaneously, 4 AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters from USS Bataan swept in from the east at wave-top height, their targeting systems already locked onto the 7 Iranian fast attack boats and the IRGC cutter. A 5th Viper held high cover above the scene, its sensors tracking every IRGC movement on the tanker deck. At 10:07 a.m., USS Mahan transmitted a final warning to the IRGC vessels on International Channel 16, in Farsi and in English. The warning stated that the Iranian vessels were directed to withdraw immediately from the vicinity of the MV Olympia Star, that all Iranian personnel aboard the vessel were directed to immediately lay down their weapons and proceed to the main deck, and that failure to comply within 60 seconds would result in the use of force. The IRGC fast attack boats did not withdraw. 3 of them accelerated toward USS Mahan's helicopters. The IRGC cutter began moving to interpose itself between the approaching Ospreys and the tanker. The 60 seconds expired. The AH-1Z Vipers engaged the fast attack boats simultaneously. The AH-1Z carries a 20mm M197 3-barrel rotary cannon with a cyclic rate of 750 rounds per minute, plus a full complement of AGM-114 Hellfire missiles and 2.75-inch Hydra rockets. At a range of 800 meters, with FLIR targeting, against fiberglass-hulled fast attack boats in flat calm water, it is not a contest. The first Viper destroyed 2 fast attack boats in a single gun run, the 20mm rounds walking across the hulls in a line of white splashes that became explosions. The second Viper took 1 Hellfire shot at the IRGC cutter, impacting its engine room and stopping the vessel dead in the water, black smoke pouring from its stern. The remaining fast attack boats turned and fled north at maximum speed. 2 were engaged by Hellfire missiles at long range. Both were destroyed. 1 made it to the horizon. USS Mahan's Seahawks tracked it at range and reported its position. It was intercepted by an Iranian Coast Guard vessel and recovered, a fact that later became a minor diplomatic complication and a major embarrassment for the IRGC. In 61 seconds, every IRGC vessel surrounding the Olympia Star had been destroyed, disabled, or driven off. The Ospreys touched down on the Olympia Star's vast forward deck, a landing zone that could have accommodated twice as many aircraft. And Marines fast-roped and ran simultaneously, moving in practiced tactical formations toward the bridge and toward the Citadel. The IRGC boarding team on the bridge, now aware that the helicopters outside the windows were not negotiating, attempted to barricade the bridge door. The Marines reached the bridge door in 90 seconds. The barricade was not a serious obstacle. The door was open in 40 seconds. The IRGC personnel on the bridge, 9 of them, their weapons pointed at a bridge that had nobody in it worth threatening, were disarmed, secured with flex cuffs, and placed face down on the bridge wing in under 3 minutes. 3 IRGC personnel who had been in the process of attempting to cut through the Citadel door when the Marines arrived on the lower decks attempted to resist. The attempt lasted approximately 12 seconds. All 3 were secured without serious injury. The Citadel door was opened by the captain from inside at 10:23 a.m. All 22 crew members of the MV Olympia Star, 12 American citizens and 10 foreign nationals, were alive and uninjured. The captain, who had spent 36 minutes in a steel box listening to the sounds of a helicopter assault conducted on his behalf, shook the hand of the Marine captain who opened his door and said 4 words that were later included in the official after-action report. He said, "I knew you'd come." He had been right. At 10:21 a.m., while the Citadel rescue was still in progress, USS Mahan closed to within 3 nautical miles of the disabled IRGC cutter and launched a boarding party of her own. The cutter's remaining crew, 8 personnel, 3 of them wounded, were taken into custody as evidence and material witnesses to the seizure. The cutter itself was seized as evidence under the law of nations. Its communications equipment and navigation logs downloaded by Navy intelligence personnel who arrived aboard the second wave of Ospreys. The intelligence harvest from those logs and communications systems would later contribute significantly to the disruption of 2 additional IRGC maritime operations that had been in planning. USS Florida, the Ohio-class cruise missile submarine that had been operating in the Gulf of Oman, received her strike orders at 10:15 a.m. While the rescue operation was still in its final phase. Her Tomahawk salvo was timed to arrive on target at the moment the last Marine lifted off the Olympia Star's deck. 32 Tomahawks targeted the IRGC naval base at Bandar Abbas, specifically the fast attack boat pens from which the 7 vessels had sortied that morning, the fuel and ammunition storage facilities, the maintenance workshops, and the command building of the IRGC Naval District Headquarters. A secondary salvo of 12 Tomahawks targeted the IRGC's maritime surveillance facility on Keshem Island, from which the Olympia Star's position and movements had been tracked and relayed to the intercept force. 44 Tomahawks, all of them impacted within a 9-minute window beginning at 10:31 a.m. At 10:29 a.m., the last Marine lifted off the Olympia Star's deck. The vessel's engines were restarted by her chief engineer, uninjured, calm, and professionally unimpressed by the events of the preceding 42 minutes. The Olympia Star resumed her heading northwest toward Ras Tanura at 12 knots. Her course took her through a strait that was now completely clear of Iranian military presence. The full accounting, compiled by 5th Fleet by early afternoon, 12 IRGC personnel captured aboard the Olympia Star, 3 wounded, none killed, 5 fast attack boats destroyed, 1 IRGC cutter disabled and seized, 1 fast attack boat fled, 22 crew members of MV Olympia Star recovered, all uninjured, 12 American citizens recovered safely. The IRGC naval base at Bandar Abbas, boat pens destroyed, fuel storage destroyed, ammunition depot destroyed, headquarters building destroyed, maritime surveillance facility on Keshem Island destroyed, Estimated IRGC personnel killed or wounded in Tomahawk strikes, 89. U.S. casualties, 0 killed. 2 Marines sustained minor injuries during the ship assault. Both treated aboard USS Mahan and returned to duty within the hour. In Tehran, the IRGC commander, who had authorized the seizure, watched his operation disintegrate in real time on a communications feed that went silent at 10:09 a.m. and never resumed. The plan that was supposed to give Iran leverage, 22 hostages, American outrage, a negotiating table where the sanctions would eventually be lifted, had lasted 36 minutes from boarding to recovery. The base from which the operation had been launched was rubble. The vessels that had conducted it were at the bottom of the Strait of Hormuz, and the 12 IRGC personnel who had boarded the Olympia Star were in U.S. military custody, being read their rights under the Military Commissions Act, their faces and fingerprints already in the biometric database of the Defense Intelligence Agency. The Strait of Hormuz remained open. It had never technically closed. The seizure of a single vessel does not close a strait. But it had been challenged. The challenge had been answered in 34 minutes by Marines who had rehearsed the answer 17 times, by a destroyer that had been waiting 11 miles away under emissions control, and by a submarine that had 44 Tomahawks assigned to pre-selected targets before the Iranian fast attack boats had finished encircling the tanker. The message was simple. It needed no press conference. It needed no speech. It was written in the operational record and in the smoking ruins of a naval base on the Iranian coast, and in the fact that the MV Olympia Star arrived at the Ras Tanura loading terminal at 6:44 p.m. that evening, exactly 4 hours and 57 minutes behind her original schedule, her crew intact, her cargo uncompromised, her flag flying. This is what happens when you seize an American vessel in international waters. You do not find a government scrambling to respond. You find a government that pre-positioned a destroyer, pre-staged a Marine Expeditionary Unit, pre-wrote the legal authorizations, and pre-programmed the Tomahawks before you gave the boarding order. You find Marines who have rehearsed your exact plan 17 times and know every compartment of your target vessel before they touch its deck. You find that the leverage you believed you had, 22 hostages, 12 of them American, lasted 36 minutes before it was no longer yours. You find that the cost of the seizure was borne entirely by the force that conducted it, and that the bill was paid in full within the hour. The Strait of Hormuz belongs to free navigation. The seas of the world belong to free navigation. And on this morning, at 9:47 a.m., under a brutal sun, on bronze-colored water, the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps made that point with a clarity that required no translation. 34 minutes, 12 Marines in flex cuffs, 22 crew members safe, and a Tomahawk salvo that arrived while the ship was still recovering her rescue force. Because in the United States military, the defense and the retaliation are not sequential. They happen at the same time.